Evelyn Kessler, host of Wednesday Wellness Chat with Evelyn and Friends. As many of you know, the pandemic brought to light the importance of practicing self-care. So during these Wednesday Wellness Chats, what I wanted to do is have conversations with friends, health and wellness experts, professionals, to discuss how we can all incorporate self-care practices in our day-to-day lives. Today's chat is with Jennifer KAVANAGH, Adrienne Garr, and Miranda Patchen. Jennifer is a Christian life coach and mental health counselor who helps women achieve their goals in the areas of Christian spiritual formation, relationships, and personal development. She's also a mental health counselor who helps clients explore and heal their trauma, broken relationships, and mental health symptoms. Adrienne is a social worker who is experienced in advocating for a variety of vulnerable populations on the macro, meso, and micro level. Adrienne utilizes a trauma-informed care human rights approach at levels of service delivery. Miranda works for M&T Bank, where she is very active in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. She draws upon her unique perspective growing up biracial in an undiverse environment. She is also passionate about health and wellness. She's a certified group fitness instructor who loves to motivate and encourage women to find exercise that they love. Let's meet our guests. Welcome, Jennifer, Adrienne, and Miranda. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I'm really excited that you have decided to join in on this discussion. As we all know, February is Black History Month, and this year the theme is Black Health and Wellness. So that is what we're going to focus on today. And this may be part one of a conversation around the state of Black women's mental health. And I feel like we will need to do another segment focusing on Black men. But as we go through this conversation, I'm sure that we will, inject certain subjects that do relate to Black men, because that's very important as well. But we'll go ahead and kick it off. I was reading in an article that said that the National Healthcare Quality and Disparities Reports indicated that racial and ethnic minorities still have less access to mental health services than whites. And when they receive care, it is more likely to be of poorer quality. And that's what I've known of the past years, right? But I'm curious, current day, where are we? Have we made much progress at all? And I want to start with, Jennifer and Adrienne, Jennifer being a life coach, Adrienne also being a social worker. So being in the field of, being there to support people and help them through some struggles that they may be facing. Could you speak to that? What's the state today for the Black community and our mental health?
So I feel like it's like a slow, like slowly rolling a big boulder, like up a gigantic, like Mount Everest. So it's like slowly better, almost like raindrops like on a big rock. So I think the awareness that, and I'm just going to be quite frank, the awareness that, that it's not just white people that suffer with like mental health issues and things like that. Um, that has been being received differently, and I think it's a generational thing. So, like my generation, the kids coming up after us, they're open to getting the support. So that's what's different,
Mm.
but it's still very much a task because, as you point out, the quality is poor. I had a mom talk to me about her daughter's interaction with a counselor this week, and it was like quite unprofessional. So the first question out of this counselor's mouth was, what's the most traumatic experience that you ever had? That's generally not how we want to start, especially if
Mm.
that therapeutic alliance, that relationship hasn't been built yet. That's just such a not a great way to start. So it's a task. I think it's getting better, but slowly.
Okay. And Jennifer, what take do you have?
I'm shocked, but not really, that a therapist would ask that question right off the bat. I've heard my fair share of horror stories of clients coming to me. My counselor did this and did that, and unfortunately, it's a real thing. Um, Getting the word out there. Um, it seems for all the talking that and all the sharing and all the hype about Black mental health, there's still the word is still not out. And yet, on the other hand, the willingness of people of darker skin colors to accept help. In my 2 years working as a mental health counselor, I've known several people, women that were African American, who specifically want an African American therapist. In our area, there's such a shortage of African American therapists. So most of my patients were like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad that I finally found you." But once they found me, it was okay. How do I help you take this cape off of having to be this Wonder Woman that we African American women have to be? Because we're mom, we're sister, we're brother, we're dad, we're everything to everyone except ourselves. So it's how do we get the word out there? And even when the word is out there, how do we help someone understand that it's okay to get help? It's
Mm. Yeah, excellent points. And I'm curious, Miranda, what has been your journey? I know, as we were doing quick introductions before I hit record, and you shared a little bit that you do seek mental health services, and we'll get into that, which each of our own experiences. But over the years, when you've come to the realization that you do need help, what was that journey for you? What did that look like? Because I want to flip to the other side of this experience. And yeah, how did that work out? Were you able to easily find a therapist, or did you have to go through a few to find that right one?
Yeah, that's a resounding no. It's a lot of work. And when I think about, a single mother with mental health issues who's struggling to feed her kids, who, just has enough to put food on the table and no time in the day to try to jump through all the hoops of finding a mental health specialist that she can click with and that is appropriate, I can see why most people don't even bother. I've had maybe 5 or 6 counselors over my lifetime, and each time it was so many phone calls, so many dead ends. Even, with EAP through my work, where we get 3 free visits for a licensed mental health counselor. Every time they give me a list of those mental health counselors that accept it, no longer in business, not accepting patients, not booking appointments for 6 months,
Mm.
always something. So when you're in a when you're in a stressful situation, when you're say a loved one has died and you're grieving and you need that help right now, it is
Mhm.
very difficult to get that unless you already have a counselor that you've established a relationship with. So I really feel strongly that that process needs to be easier. And I don't know how we get there, but until we do, a lot of people are going to suffer by themselves.
This is
Yeah, and
so true.
that's like a good point about people's basic needs not being met yet. So there,
Mhm.
it's almost it's a luxury for a lot of people who are like surviving. They don't have time to call, 30 people, and then more than half of them are like dead ends, especially when they're trying to get food on the table and all the other things. Like
Yeah.
it's just, they may need like help, and actually that situation is probably what's making the mental health symptoms more severe. It's not having everything that you need. So yeah. Yep.
And I would add that my own personal experience when I finally got to the place of accepting and wanting help. And I want to get into that next, right? Because we have this generational mindset and these beliefs around mental health, mental care, seeking mental health from a religious standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. So for me, it was both of those, right? Where just be strong, pray about it, pray through it. And I'm 100% fully agree that prayer truly can help us through many things, because it has helped me tremendously in many spaces that I found myself in. However, you need that element, right? You need that additional layer. You need that someone who is trained to walk you through the process and to help you through that. So the struggle that I faced the first time that I found someone, you mentioned EAP, Miranda, that's how I finally decided. I was like, okay, you know what? I don't have to pay for it. Let me try it out for the first time ever. I'm not going to tell anybody in my family. I'm not telling any of my friends that I'm seeking help. I'm just going to test it out. Unfortunately, that first therapist couldn't really relate. What I was sharing, I think it was just shocking to some extent. And there were certain experiences, racial experiences, right? That when someone doesn't look like you, does not have the same experience as you, they just can't relate. They can't speak to it. So I don't know in the mental health space how folks are trained to be able to help someone, right, who has a completely different experience that you have. But for me, that completely turned me off. And for several years, I decided not to go back to get help, where I was in a place that I really desperately needed that assistance. So I guess from a personal perspective, what has been your journeys? I know, Miranda, you've spoken about your experience. Jennifer and Adrian, what has been yours? And I guess what have been some of those hurdles that you needed to overcome to get to that place where you were comfortable to speak with someone? Or have you always been comfortable with the idea?
I can speak a little to that. I also wanted to address you speaking to the religious aspect of African American lives. I see this all the time. One of the barriers to seeking counseling is, will this person understand my religious beliefs? Will they allow me to talk about God, or will they only talk about mental health?
Mm,
It's something I encounter actually quite frequently. And if I pick up on this in a person and I call it out, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could talk about God in counseling. I
mm,
thought it was only mental health. So part of what I do for my clients is teach them, here's where, mostly Christians, I work with Christians, here's where Christianity and mental health intersect. And
mm,
and how do you walk that out? How do you allow mental health help you grow and it not be against what you believe? I believe that Jesus gave us, like God gave us, counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists to help us along. But what does that look like for you in your everyday life?
mhm,
My own personal journey with mental health, I've seen counselors as part of going to school. It was kind of a requirement for us to be in the chair, to know what it's like when we
mm,
have someone in front of us. What does it feel like to be in that chair when you're being asked, what does it feel like for you? What are you thinking? Or this, that, and the third. So I definitely I've had my fair share of counselors, and I do it, one, for myself, and two, so I can continue being in touch of what it's like to be in that chair.
mm, mhm. Great
For
points.
me, it's
Thank you, Jennifer.
yeah. For me, it's been tough. So I get like weekly supervision, but that's more for like professional development. So my last experience with counseling, it didn't feel like, and I don't know if I made a mistake in letting the person know that I was also a social worker or what, but it felt more like the supervision I get weekly, which isn't really what I needed. Also, um, as far as the faith, someone's faith, so I'm Christian, and I did look her up and go to her because she was Christian as well, but the problem was that as we went through our sessions, in addition to it kind of not feeling like what I needed at the moment, there was this, advice she gave me that, oh, well, maybe, God will just, take your depression away. Because I've had struggles with depression since I was like very young. So I probably say even 10, 11, 12, just kind of knowing what to do to take care of myself so that it isn't like as present in my life. But that just kind of took me away. And I know clinically, someone who has, someone who's very active in their faith, someone who is praying, meditating, whether they're Christian or not, that actually is a protective factor. And that actually multiplies the effect of the clinical intervention. So if someone is Christian and they are still going to church, they are still, praying, they are still doing, the Bible studies and different things like that. Those are protective factors. And it's okay to talk about like your faith in session. And a lot of people fear it because if someone doesn't understand it, something else, it's like, it's almost pathological, but that's not what it should be. But for me, I'm definitely having a hard time wanting to get back to the search, because I definitely do need like some counseling just because of the job that I have, and some other things that are going on with me. But I'm like not looking forward to the search. Miranda, I'm to you. I'm just like not looking forward to the dead ends and all of that stuff.
And finding that right fit, right? Because you need to find that right fit. So, I know depression has come up. If you have mentioned experiencing depression, navigating that. And recently I heard of the terminology functioning depression. So, Jennifer, Adrian, or either one of you want to explain what functioning depression is, what that looks like, and how can we somewhat combat that or navigate that, right, as women?
So usually the clinical term we use is like dysthymia, and it's from like, mild to severe, and that's all like subjective. So what might be mild for one person can be severe for, someone else. So it's just where the symptoms are just like impacting people in different ways. So when they say high functioning, or I actually don't like those terms. I don't know how you feel about it, Jennifer, but I don't I don't like when they say like high functioning, because it makes it seem as though because it's it makes it seem as though because the person is not completely withdrawn in their depression, or because they're still active in different parts of their life at a certain level, that it's less serious than someone who is like, full on into the depression, not taking care of themselves, completely isolating, not eating, those different things. But to me, giving it that label is more dangerous because it kind of allows people to not pay as close of attention to their loved one as they should be. So with high functioning depression, as they say, it's a similar pattern. Like, people are going to work, but maybe they're just working and just going home. Maybe they're not eating at work all day. And then when they get home, they're eating very little or not at all. They aren't really reaching out to people. They're kind of showing up just enough to where maybe folks won't be too worried about them. The other thing is a real clear sign is like folks being like irritable and agitated, and then losing interest in things that they once actually liked. So it's like, someone loves going to, art galleries, and their favorite artist is doing an exhibition and they don't want to go. That's a sign. And even if it is such, oh, I'm so tired, I don't want to go, you might want to press it a little more, because those are the types of things that you want to look for. But yeah, when they say high functioning, I don't like that. It really is misleading, because it's just as serious.
I look at it, I agree with Adrian, and I look at it as on a spectrum, either you're depressed or not. But I also don't like to diagnose patients. I have to, because that's just what I do, and we have to charge the insurance companies. and giving a diagnosis to a patient may actually be more harmful to them. So I'll talk about more, what are they experiencing? And if they come to me, Jennifer, I think I have borderline or this, that, or third, then I may walk them through the DSM-5 and be like, okay, here's how we diagnose this. Let's talk about the different elements and let's see if this might be so or not. Most times it's actually not, because patients actually don't understand how we diagnose different things like borderline or bipolar or stuff like that. It sounds good, and in popular culture, everyone's borderline and bipolar, but when we get down to the actual diagnosing elements, it's not really so. But also, I like to be human with my patients, and versus giving them a label which may attach to them they may carry with them for a long time. I like to say, hey, look, what's going on? Let's talk about what's affecting you and let's speak to that and let's work on that. How will it affect you if I did tell you you were borderline or bipolar, this, that, and the other? So I tend to shy away from telling my patients what their actual diagnoses are unless I absolutely have to, or if they can handle it. So those are just decisions I have to make clinically. Also, one thing that's been floating through my mind as we've been talking is oftentimes I have to explain to my patients what mental health counseling really is. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the counseling world, psychiatry, psychology, who does what, and when I come to counseling, what actually happens. A lot of times my patients come and they're like, fix me. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. And then they're like, well, why did I come here? What's your purpose?
Or tell me what to do. Can I be honest? When I first started researching or was interested in getting some help, I was thrown off the first time. I'm like, why is this woman keep asking me questions? Like, tell me how to solve my problems. She keeps asking me questions. So like, I was so annoyed and, finally got educated on the whole thing, right? And, because you have this perception and you think, hey, this person is going to tell me A, B, C, D, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be all set. That's going to fix it. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think there's still so many people out there who think that that's what it is.
That's a lot of what like the first couple sessions are for me too, is like, it's, psychoeducation, Jennifer. It's like, this is what the relationship is. This is what, this is what we do. This is what it's not. So yeah, and we do find that a lot. Like, if you're in the mental health field, people being really annoyed with like questions. Because the session is about you. So we get our information, we take our lead from you, because we're really just going to sit with you through whatever you've been through. So we really need to kind of get into those questions. And so sometimes, yeah, that can be frustrating for people because they want us to fix them, and that's not how it works.
Yeah.
We want to fix them fast. So patients come in, not only do they want us to fix them, but they want us to fix them yesterday. And I have to do more teaching around that. One, I can't fix you. And even if I could, I can't do it in one day. That if you have been struggling with this problem for 10 years, it's probably going to take just as long for you to truly get a grasp on how to handle this. Some patients end up not coming back because of that. And some, it helps them, it sobers them, like, oh, okay, there's a reason that it's taking this long. So for some, it's helpful, the psychoeducation. For some, they're just like, nope, it's not fast enough. I don't want it.
Yeah. So speaking about rapport and building that relationship with the therapist, right? Miranda, I'm curious, when did you know that the therapist you found was the right one?
Oh, I haven't yet.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No,
Okay.
I honestly, no. I mean, like I said, over the years, I've maybe seen 5 or so, plus a pastor at my church. I don't think any of them have been a great fit. And the one that I most recently saw, my husband and I just did 3 sessions of marriage counseling, and it was through EAP, and it was a counselor that I have seen in the past when my father passed away. And, I think there was this pressure of like, okay, hurry up. Like to what Jennifer and Adrian have said, I think the reason that I was looking for something quick is because it's expensive. Right?
Yes.
It's expensive.
Okay.
So
Yes.
no, I'm not going to pay 200 a week for the next 10 years for
Right.
50 minutes. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
reasonable for most people.
Yeah.
So I think, sometimes that has pushed me to seek counseling at, I'm a Christian, I go to a Christian church, but, it's a 60-year-old pastor who doesn't understand what I'm going through as a biracial woman.
Mm.
And I felt a little judged because he would keep throwing quotes from the Bible in that I wasn't necessarily even familiar with yet in my Christian journey. And then I felt like, oh, I should know that. Now I feel like I have to go read more. So no, I haven't found a perfect fit. And also what you both were saying about this time, yeah, that's been my diagnosis since probably I was 13 or 14, along with anxiety. And, when you're talking about some of those symptoms, I'm thinking, yeah, that's happening with me right now. That's been happening with me for years now. But if the doctor asks me, do I have depression and am I depressed? I say no, because that's not what I was diagnosed with. So to your point, I see how those labels can affect a certain mindset. And yeah, maybe the Lexapro I'm taking for this dysthymia isn't working right now because I'm experiencing all the things that you guys just said. Even, like working from home now, if I'm not working out that day, I won't shower. I just don't feel like showering, and that's not me. I don't get dressed. I don't wear makeup. I don't. There's just something like I don't have the energy, all of that. So maybe that is that all creeping in again. But so back to your point, no, I have not unfortunately found a good fit.
And it's harder now because, also too, there's, we're still very much into a worldwide pandemic. So Miranda, I'd say just be gracious with yourself. Like that's also very present all the time.
Yeah.
And it's definitely been difficult now for people to find anybody because of like because of what's going on in the world, and just finding like a competent, like, someone that is, has cultural humility, who understands these different things. It's definitely tough.
So, the cost that's a really great point that you made, Miranda, because, I remember at one point a therapist saying, oh, maybe, we start at twice a week. And I'm thinking,
what?
Let me go play the lotto first. Okay. Because that's not in the budget. So as we're talking about, Black health, mental health, and wellness, as we've brought up the point that, it's still a struggle for many in the Black community. Cost, right, is a big issue. So are there any services for people who just really cannot afford, right? Say, for example, a weekly meeting with a therapist, or what are some resources out there for people who can't afford to see a therapist every week?
Sure. There's the Greater Buffalo Counseling Centers, GBCC. They're located, I don't know if they've moved, but they were located at the Presbyterian Church off of, what is that? Main Street and Niagara Falls Boulevard over by UV South. And I don't remember the name, but there was or may still be a website, much like BetterHelp and Headway, that specifically caters to African Americans, I believe. So just like a little Google search might bring that up. I don't recall, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll make sure that those resources are listed so folks can take a look and visit those websites and see, if it's those are resources that might be beneficial to people. So that's always top of mind. Like already we have so much against, right? The community and getting help and seeking help and getting that support. If there's a way to cut back on the costs or offer these free services, that is huge. So I want to pivot a little bit to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There has been so much focus on DEI. So for some, it's great. Some feel like, oh, this is awesome. The focus is on these topics, very important topics. But also with certain conversations I've had, it almost makes it quite unbearable to be the focus. Say, for example, if you work in an all-white office or you're on a team, you're the only Black person, and then in a meeting, it's decided, okay, we're going to talk about, what happened or the recent shooting or whatever. For some, that can really get to them mentally, emotionally, having to have those conversations. And I think many people see it as a positive, but for some, it's really affecting them, from a mental state. So I really wanted to touch on that and maybe start with you, Miranda, since you're heavily involved with DI work at the bank. Have you heard of folks not being comfortable? Black folks who have had to be part of those conversations. Um, have you had that feedback?
Yeah, I actually have. And in the sense that, obviously the bank is majority white. And, when these topics come up in meetings or presentations, if you're the one Black person in a group of 50 or 100 or 30 or even 10, everybody automatically looks at you. Everybody wants to know what's your opinion and how can we fix it? And whether you are a sharer or not, you're kind of put on the spot.
Mm,
For me, it hasn't been an issue because I'm passionate about DEI work. So I feel like people that know me know I'm an open book and they can ask me those things. But it does get a little touchy when, people who are maybe allies consistently come to you and say, what can I do better? What can I do to help? Teach me how to communicate better. Teach me this, teach me that. And it's kind of like I'm working through my own trauma. I'm working through my own battles. And I didn't sign up to teach all white people how they need to proceed going forward.
mm.
And that's mostly been the feedback that I've gotten from other people in my position. It's like, okay, well, let's go ask the Black person what we're supposed to
Oh,
do.
right, right.
So that's been my experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So Adrian and Jennifer, I mean, on your end, I don't know what that looks like in your space, where you work, or maybe even if it's been brought up by any of your patients or folks that you see. Um,
Um, it's interesting because it was actually the last session that I had. The team that I work on is almost like 100% Black. Our director isn't. She's really supportive. She's just trying to kind of learn how to be, as supportive as possible.
mm,
Um, and the last conversation that we had, it definitely was about this gentleman. It was treated like very unfairly um, by the job that he works for. And he had never like really experienced anything like this, like, in his entire life. And so we were just kind of discussing how he's kind of realizing that, certain things in the US have been put into place that make it harder for, specifically, Black people to kind of get get ahead. So it was just like a kind of like a bomb going off for him because he hadn't really experienced that before. So at work, not at this position, I haven't experienced where, like I'm the only, it was more so through my master's program where, generally speaking, when things would come up, everyone's looking at me and I'm just like, I'm just not feeling it because race-based trauma is a thing. And
Mhm.
about these things and witnessing, George Floyd and all the other names that we could probably be on here for another hour, talking about and discussing. It's traumatic for us to see and witness, and then the processes of how they mishandle, just these people's lives.
Mhm.
It affects all of us. So I'm not particularly welcoming to those conversations because they're very difficult for me, and it definitely brings up a lot of not so great emotions. So I'm definitely not the best one.
Yeah.
So because
I
it's
hear
hard.
you. It's tough.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Jennifer, any insight?
Sure. I I'm not open to those conversations as well. I think I mostly zone out when they're happening in professional spaces because usually I am one of a very few of,
Mm.
if not the only one sometimes. Um, and my perhaps very unpopular opinion is, institutions are created by, run by, for humans. So they're created by humans, run by humans, for humans. And the only way to change those institutions are to change the heart of the human who is creating and running these institutions. And until that happens, we're going to keep getting um, more of the same. So,
That was one of the questions my client asked me. He was like, what is stopping these people who are in these positions to, bring everybody up and make change policy and make things better? And my answer is always like, to your point, they don't care enough. What is their heart looking like? Because you have all these people and everybody is not really given the same access and opportunity. You literally have the ability to change that for everyone and you're not. My only conclusion has to be that you don't care. You couldn't. So I agree with you, Jennifer. Like, what are these people's hearts looking like? So
Yeah, and I think one key thing Jennifer brought up is it starts at the top. If you have someone at the top who cares and who understands the importance of the change required, right, to begin to change policies within an institution that are therefore then going to benefit the minority groups, then that's a start, right? For me personally, when I see that, then I'm more open to have those conversations because I know at the top they're making that effort and they're being part of the they are part of the conversation. So that's crucial. What happens sometimes though, you may have someone super passionate at the top, but then down here way at the bottom, they're stuck, they can't make progress because management in the middle is halting, right? Some may not care, they're not involved, they don't have time for that. So although the passion up here is there, but it's going to take the work of, some of that middle management to really allow that moving forward motion to happen. So it's definitely a very difficult thing to navigate. And I have found myself in situations, taking the lead on certain initiatives, DEI related, where, folks want to be part of the conversation. They want to be part of the quote unquote movement. But then when you force them, well, not force them, when you nudge them to be uncomfortable, right? To start having those really uncomfortable conversations, race related conversations, this is what we need to change, then, I have found that pushback happens because now you're making them uncomfortable, right? Oh, now you're being exclusive. You're only speaking on behalf of your people. so that has happened too along the way. And I have found that for me personally, it definitely affects me mentally, right? When you're the only one, or there may be only two of you within a group of 30 some people, 50 some people, and they're pushing back on wanting to address certain topics that relate to how you're treated as a human being. I think that's where, for me, I find issues and I have problems with that, right? Because, oh no, we can't touch on that subject because it's going to make this group of people feel uncomfortable. Well, we've been uncomfortable for centuries, right? We haven't had, so much over all this time. It is time for folks to feel uncomfortable. So I think from that regard, that's definitely impacted me and affected me, where sometimes I'm like, I don't even want to talk about this. I don't even want to have this conversation. I'm more than willing, I'm totally open to be part of the work to advance, right? Whatever it is we need to do so that folks that look like us, so that folks that are considered part of minority have opportunities that they've never had, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Somebody that I respect at the bank who has been a leader in DEI recently said, I'm done telling trauma stories. I'm done sharing. If no action is involved,
Yeah.
I'm not doing it anymore. And a lot of us are getting to that point where, okay, we can meet and we can talk about it all day long. At the end of the day, the next day we come in and everything remains the same.
Yes, yes. And that, for me, now you're re-traumatized again, personally.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because you told me we are here to address this, and now I've put myself out there emotionally, have told you some very personal things, and I feel naked now, right? Because you know all of this about me. So now I'm re-traumatized because now we're not addressing it. So it's difficult to navigate. And so I can appreciate Adrienne and Jennifer, where you're coming from, because when you put yourself out there, you don't know what you're going to get. You may get, a situation where solutions are where you're able to work on solutions and address some certain problems to advance equity, right, and inclusion and all of that. But then you may hit a wall, and all that work you put in, what was it for? So I just wanted to touch on that because, DEI is so huge, it's so big. I'm involved, I'm in the work, doing the work, and, we're involved and stuff like that. But, as I go through that journey, it also hits me every now and then that, what, sometimes I just don't feel like it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to have this conversation. Go Google it. Go get a book. Get a book.
And that's having healthy boundaries. You have the right to not share all the time.
Exactly.
Talking about some of those experiences, I mean, depending on what it is, the person who's, sharing, they're re-experiencing that. And for that to be a curiosity, and then on the back end, not really do anything to kind of move things forward, even a centimeter, that is what, that's where the problem is. So I very rarely share anything because of that fact. Cause it's like, I don't know if that relationship is probably not there where I can trust you enough where I will go that deep into it. So just to avoid, I'm already, going to be agitated about it. So just to avoid anything else, I'm just gonna pass. I'm just gonna pass. I'm gonna start talking about, flowers or something very non-threatening, because it's so difficult.
Yeah. And I think that's something oh, go ahead, Miranda.
No, I was just going to say real quick, I think the only thing that keeps me going and keeps me sharing is the overwhelming amount of feedback that I receive after from people that say, you know what, I had no idea. You changed my mind completely. I am, me and my family and I are going to conduct ourselves differently from now on. We got your back. We're going to be allies. You know, if I weren't receiving that and knowing that I'm making a small difference person by person, I wouldn't continue to re-traumatize myself, of course. I don't expect to change policy, but I do know that I've been successful in changing people's minds.
For sure. Yeah. I would agree. I would agree with that. Yes, there are so many opportunities, right, to have a conversation and to be able to impact someone or change their opinion on the way they view things or the way they behaved. Of course, many will push back and not even want to listen, but you do have those opportunities where people are willing to listen and and make a change. I'm sorry, Adrian, were you going to say something?
No, I think that that's how it starts is what you're doing, Miranda. Like that's how it starts. Is like one person like slowly, at a time. I've I'm usually in situations where it's not gonna matter. So you're in a like great spot where you know that you're getting the feedback. So but that's how it starts. Like it has
Mhm.
to start
Yeah.
somewhere and that's definitely how it starts.
So I know we're almost out of time. One thing I wanted to touch on really quickly before we end, just a couple of other items for Jennifer and Adrian specifically. You know, so many people are walking around with race-based trauma, and I'm sure each and every single one of us has a story that's tied to race-based trauma. There's generational trauma, childhood trauma, and so much more. For someone that is struggling with that, what's a great place to start? Because I know in our community, it's still taboo, right? Seeing a therapist, it's still taboo. We've come a long way. It's getting better, but it's still a thing, right? Where folks won't even tell their loved ones that they're going to see a therapist. So what some advice do you have for someone who may be watching and afraid to seek help? What are some suggestions you have for them?
Sure. I'd start off by saying, we're not out to get you. We really do want to help. Um, and even when we make a mistake as a therapist, because we do, I always encourage my patients to tell me I said something wrong, tell me I didn't meet a need or whatever, so that I can have the opportunity to repair that. That also teaches you that, oh, it's okay for a person to make a mistake and for you guys to work it out. The relationship you have with your counselor is one of the most healthiest that you'll have. And in that space, it's safe enough to for either one person to make a mistake and learn how to repair. Also, one thing that I've had to learn along the way that I think was a starting point for me was yes, there is a lot of race-based trauma out there, but I had to start asking myself, is it always about the race? And if so, how much? Because earlier in life, everything was this happened to me because I was black. They ran me over because I was black. They hate me because I was black. They undercooked my food because I was black. They gave me a negative grade on my paper because I was black. At some point in time, I had to ask myself, wait a minute, is it because I'm Black this is happening? And as I started asking myself that question about every situation I was in, I started to realize not every single time it was because I was Black. Sometimes, yes. And in those situations, I could, do whatever I needed to do to advocate for myself. But in those other situations, I had to tell myself, no, it's not because I'm Black. That person could have been having a bad day, and I just happened to be there, and they took it out on me. Nothing to do with race. So I would start one, trust your therapist, work with them, be open with them, tell them if you don't like what they're doing, and start asking, is everything that's happening to me necessarily because I'm Black?
I usually am a big fan of like groups because those are a little bit easier to get access to. So if someone's like really struggling, there are there are some good Facebook groups if they're vetted properly, depending on what the issue is. So I would say They can try like, different groups. I would say that whatever it is that generally makes them feel better, like if it's journaling or if it's reading, playing around with the dog, whatever that is, I would say do more of that, do more of those things, because as we discussed, finding like a right fit for a therapist, it's not like it kind of is like a shot in the dark, but it's a process. So until that time, whatever it is that they're doing to take care of themselves, if it's aromatherapy, whatever it is, to make time to do more of those things until they can get to a place where they found a right fit. Reaching out to friends that they trust. So it might not be, everybody in the friend circle that they can share or feel comfortable with sharing, like, hey, I'm having a hard time. They may be able to confide in someone, and it's not to replace like the therapeutic process, but it's to have support. So all of those things, doing more of what takes care of them is a way to support. Reaching out like to friends and family members who support you, that will help as they go through the process of trying not to struggle through by themselves, because unfortunately, like culturally, it's great that America, USA #1 independence and all that, but folks are like human beings are made for connection. And
Yeah.
when you're struggling, you definitely need to connect with those folks who are going to support you in its attempt to reconnect with yourself. So
Right.
all of those things that help you feel better, do that to the like 1,000 power as you can, and then just reach out to people who support you, and that will help kind of be the bridge to until you can get the right therapist for you. So that's what I would suggest. Definitely don't do it alone, because
Mm.
it just gets worse, because that's just the nature of a lot of these types of things. Um, you need the support, reach out to the Lifeline. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. And you mentioned, doing things that you enjoy, doing things that you love. And Miranda is a fitness guru. So, Miranda, can you share a little bit how, yeah, what you do, how you help others, and how it's helped you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exercise.
So
What was that,
uh,
Adrian?
Oh, I was saying like exercise and fitness is one of the best natural things like
yeah.
people
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah, so like I said, I've had anxiety for as long as I can remember, and for me, it's genetic, and the best way that I've found to cope with it is by exercising, and I schedule it into almost every day, and if I don't do it, that's when I start to lay on the couch and not shower and have no motivation, and it's chemical, right? It's when you're exercising, you're releasing serotonin and dopamine and all the feel good hormones, and we need that. We need to move. We need to get outside. We need to exert energy. We can't sit around all day. That's just not how we're built. So I do motivate women to take group fitness classes and do something that you enjoy. Sometimes just plodding along on the treadmill is drudgery. It feels like work, and nobody wants to do that. So find something that you love.
Mm.
Zumba, I teach turbo kick, dancing, whatever it is that brings you joy and gets you moving, that can make such a big difference in your mental health.
I love it. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. My favorite is dancing. Okay. When I dance, I just feel like all the
Yeah,
stress is just melting off. I haven't danced in a while, so I better get to dancing again.
that's right.
So, ladies, this was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experiences, your stories. This means a lot. It means a great deal. And I do hope that folks that will watch us will be encouraged to, maybe raise their hand and maybe give it a try and reach out to someone for help, someone that they can talk to. Are there any final comments, any final words that any of you want to say before we end the conversation?
Some therapists have sliding scales for the expense. Sometimes that can be a thing.
Oh,
For
okay.
the expense, some therapists will do like sliding scales if they're, if you kind of let them know, like, listen, I cannot be paying, the price of my firstborn every every they have some therapists do have sliding scales. So I would encourage that if there's, anybody out there who's looking at it and the prices are not, what you can do, definitely ask about that, because some therapists do offer that. Some therapists also offer free sessions depending on the client, but they do it for certain people. So sometimes if someone is at a certain income, they can offer that. But the sliding scale is usually a little bit more common.
Okay, that's good to
And
know.
everything. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that is good to
Yep.
know. Thank you so much, Adrienne. Any other final comments?
Sure. I'll say it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. You won't die from feeling uncomfortable. And it's okay to take off the cape.
Yes. Oh gosh. Thanks for saying that. All right. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you so much. And
Thank
we'll
you.
talk later. Take care.
Thank you for all you do, Evelyn. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.